So, in 2002, there was a schizophrenic artist in the Welsh countryside by the name of Richard Sumner who went missing. He left without a trace, and his body later was actually found handcuffed to a tree, and the key was barely out of sight. He was suicidal, but he had changed his mind when he had gotten into the forest. He went out with the intention to commit suicide and chained himself to a tree, obviously, and he took the key and he threw it out of reach. But unfortunately, because he was schizophrenic and his moods are constantly changing, he decided later that he didn't want to die, but he couldn't reach the key, so he was doomed to die anyways. His body was found much later, I think a week or so. He had previously tried the exact same suicide mission, but he had been found before he perished, and so this time he was not found. Let's see. Well, so this is one of the many cases that I researched for my original product, which we'll get into a little bit later. I thought it was really interesting to see that some suicides can appear to be similar to murders. Anyone who stumbles across the scene right away might automatically assume that it's a murder, considering it looks very suspicious. However, with further investigation, you are able to determine that it was not, in fact, a murder, but a suicide. So my topic of study is forensic pathology, which, for those of you who do not know, is autopsies for those who are suspiciously deceased. Say, for example, there is a child who is deceased and they have multiple bruises. They would be brought into the lab to be examined for child abuse. As soon as it could be very well an accident, but they want to make sure that it is an accident and not child abuse, which would be murder. So my name is Allyson Cavaness. I'm 17 years old. I obviously am a senior this year. I really like astronomy. In fact, that's one of my many hobbies. I own a telescope at home and a microscope. I enjoy looking at both things both big and small. I'm a first-year ISM student. I have two sisters and one brother. My two sisters' names are Madison and Riley, and my little brother's name is Braden. They are 14, 11, and 7. And let's see, my favorite subject is biology, but I also enjoy chemistry and anatomy. I've been studying forensics since I was 10 years old. I skipped around to a lot of different forensic things because there's so many different forensic varieties, such as forensic anthropology, which is the study of bones, entomology, bugs, serology, fluids such as urine, etc. But I decided eventually to land on forensic pathology because it was what I enjoyed most. My father is a surgical oncologist, which is tumors and cancer within the body that can be removed surgically, such as liver cancer and such things. That would be a picture from a long time ago when I was much younger and my mom had blonde hair. That's Riley and Maddie there. And then this is a pretty recent, up-to-date picture of just how things have changed. So why did I choose ISM? Well, I wanted some experience in the field. I wanted to be able to connect with someone who would be able to give me that experience that I wanted. I thought that it would be a wonderful idea to broaden my horizons and get into contact with more people who are forensic related, so that when I actually get into the field, I will have a little bit more knowledge concerning people. And then I wanted some hands-on experience, which unfortunately I don't get too much of because I'm not allowed to obviously hold a scalpel and cut someone open. But I do get a little bit of hands-on with replica skeletons. I'm able to look at them and see they're very, very similar to actual human skeletons. And so I'm able to look at the skeletons and learn off of them as a primary resource, as opposed to just reading from books, which is what I've been doing for the past 5 years. I wanted some knowledge on the topic. I wanted to see if there's any more knowledge I would be able to gain from this experience as opposed to just reading from books. Wanted to explore the field. I'm a bit of a workaholic, so I enjoy having more things to do regarding things that I'm very interested in. I really like research, so I thought it would be interesting to do a lot of research. And I'm really interested in criminals and criminal minds, not the show, but So I thought it would be a really good way to get into the heads of some criminals. And my quote is, "A question that sometimes drives me hazy, am I or the others crazy?" by Albert Einstein. And I think that it really depicts the fact that insanity, which is what we most often say that murderers are, is really rather a subjective viewpoint. It's not an actual thing. That it's very subjective based on people's personalities and their opinions, because insanity is not really something that we can place a pin on. We just say anyone who does anything that's out of the ordinary is insane. And so for you think that you're perfectly sane, and those of you who do not think that you're perfectly sane, you probably are. And those who are not sane generally have the same view. They think that they're perfectly sane. And so it's really a big debate over whether or not you are the crazy one or the people around you are in fact the crazy ones and then you're perfectly sane. For research, I've done quite a few things. I have Dr. Urban, she's my mentor. She's been teaching me anatomy recently. We've been going over with the replica skeletons, just different anatomy and different bone parts, which I'm already mostly familiar with, but it's good to get a good reminder. I've been looking at some morgue cases, a lot of which, the newer ones, I'm not allowed to really share the information of, but the ones that have been released already to the public, I'd be more than happy to share with you. They get really interesting. You get quite a few different people in there that you're not really sure what happened to them, and you really have to look at the different things that have happened to them, and just the body set has a lot to say if you know what to look for. So I also am looking into forensic anthropology, which is one of my main side things, I guess, that I'm researching, because I intend to be a forensic pathologist with a side of forensic anthropology. I plan to be able to both identify people from their bones and from the cause of death from their remains. So the skills I've learned are critical thinking, separation, and by separation I mean you have to separate yourself from the crime scene, because you have to be able to look at the crime and determine what's happened without getting a personal attachment. Otherwise it's going to be very difficult to move on. You learn a lot of patience, because you have to be able to look through different collections of information, and you have to be able to analyze them, and sometimes you don't always get the result you're looking for, and you have to go back and do more research or do more tests. And you have to be adaptable. You have to be able to pretty much move around and do what you need to do to get the job done. So a few more of them are, you need to be able to balance coworkers and family. You need to be able to just research like crazy, because research is very, very important in forensic pathology. You need to be able to snip a little bit of free time out of your life so that you have more time to work on work sometimes. And knowledge is the key to success. So my original work is an informational booklet with a compilation of the strangest or most bizarre murders that I've been able to research. Murders, suicides, accidents, anything I've been able to find that's been really out of the ordinary. I put them into a compilation, which I don't actually have here for you today because it's not quite printed yet. It's going into the printing lab to be made into a tiny book. But there's a lot of different pages, and there's a lot of different things I put into this book. A lot of them have actually been really interesting. I was surprised to find that some of the strangest cases are some of the most the ones that you would definitely not expect. But so I also have the PDF file for that if anyone wants to ask for it. So how did I do my original product? I put it together. I did lots of research, first of all, which is thankfully my favorite thing to do. So it's just going through many pages. You can't rely on every source that you look up. It's very difficult to get sources from a scholar type website because they don't really record things like murders or suicides and accidents. So you have to research them on less well-known sites, but then you also have to research them on several other to confirm that they're actual legitimate things and not urban legends and stuff like that. Steps Obviously, there was the research portion, was quite a bit of it. I had to include a lot of the research in different parts of the research assessments, and I just put a lot of it together into one big thing. I had to separate it by accident, murder, suicide, and I had to include a bibliography at the end, and include all of the websites that I found and make sure to include them in a way that would be appropriate. I had to refer to different murders. I gave summaries of the murders, the suicides, or the accidents, and I made sure to summarize them in a way that would not be disrespectful to any of the deceased, which is very important. You don't want someone coming after you about that kind of thing. Why did I do this for my original product? Well, I enjoy strange things, and fortunately for me, murders, suicides, and accidents, some of them can be very, very strange indeed. And it was just really more of I want to make a compilation of these things so that people don't have to search all over the internet for them and find out whether or not they're actually verified. I just wanted to put it into one thing that people can look at, flip through, and figure out on their own if they think it's really that strange or not. Here's getting a little bit closer up to just the kind of the organization of the book type thing. There's chapter 1, the homicidal, and it's just a continuation. It's based on names and just gives a short summary there. So I thought one thing that you guys might be really interested in is I was going to teach you guys how to be able to differentiate between the different races and skulls. So there are many different characteristics to look at when you're examining skulls, but skulls are actually one of the most defining features of the human race. You can find pretty much any information you want about the person's ethnicity, their age, anything like that, you can pretty much tell from their skull. So one of the first things looking at the skulls is that they have very different shapes, as you can tell, but there's 3 main categories, and a lot of the different sub-races, if you will, fit into the categories, such as like you might be wondering like where Indian is and stuff like that. That would actually, they're extremely similar to the Asian type, the Asian skull, and so they're classified under there. But one of the big things that really differentiates skull between skull is the nose. The nose is actually probably one of the most dead giveaway type factors. As you can see, for black individuals, the nose is actually about as long as it is width as it is height, and so it's almost a round shape. The Asians have more of, it's more rounded as well, however it's more openly rounded. They have about, I don't know, they're about normal, about maybe half as wide as it is, not half as wide, maybe about 3/4 as wide as it is lengthwise. And then the white individuals actually have a nose that comes at more of like a pear shape. It's open on the bottom, but it comes to be more closed up at the top. And it's actually about, this isn't a very good example, but normally they're about twice as long as they are width-wise. When you turn the skull to the side, you're going to have what's just called a nasal bone here, and it cuts off here where the cartilage begins on your nose. That's also very differential between different skulls. When you turn a black skull to the side, you're going to see just, this is for black and Asian, you're just going to see kind of a general cutoff. It aligns at more of an angle outwards for them, their chin and their nasal bone. Whereas for the white individuals, it almost aligns at a perfect line. So when you look at the nasal cutoff and the chin, you're going to see almost a perfect straight line. There's also a few more things. There's also, if you're interested, there's differential between male and female. The male bone is very rough, and it has a lot of different rough bone spaces because it's got to hold on to a lot more muscle than the female skulls. The female skulls are generally very petite and very smooth. However, there's one very distinct feature on the male. There's a little bit of a bone curve in the back that holds onto a very specific muscle that is almost non-existent for females. So mentor experiences, I interviewed a lot of people. I interviewed Miss Walls. She was not a doctor or anything of the sort, but she worked at a morgue, I guess. It's more of a funeral home where they prepare the bodies, they embalm them, and they make sure that they look nice before they go into the caskets, which I thought was really interesting because it's always kind of fun to see the kind of tools they use in embalming a body and what they have to do and the stuff they go through. One very important and interesting piece of information I gathered while talking with her was that different races generally have different types of mourning that they do for their dead. For example, there are certain Indian cultures in which they'll almost climb into the casket to be with their deceased. And then there are certain other cultures that are found in Africa in which it's basically a crying competition, like who can cry the loudest, cares the most, and stuff like that. The first person I interviewed at this general morgue up in Dallas, which is where my mentor works, that's Dr. Urban there. The very first person I interviewed was Dr. Quinton, and he was very interesting. He was, I don't know if you guys know him, he was the mentor of another student who was here a couple years ago. He was a fantastic guy. He taught me quite a bit, and he forwarded me to quite a few of the other doctors there so that I would be able to talk to them and see who I would be most interested in being my mentor. I spoke to Dr. Dyer. She was really interesting as well. She is a forensic pathologist but also a lawyer, so she's very familiar with law and how the law things work, so that when she goes in to testify again for a case, she's able to understand what needs to be said in order to get a specific result. There was Dr. Hastings. He was more of a fellow. He wasn't quite a forensic pathologist yet, but he had a lot to teach me about what I'm going to be experiencing when I first get into forensic pathology. When I'm first a forensic pathologist, there will be a lot to examine on my own, but there will also be a lot of things that I need to do to prepare for the actual forensic pathologist, such as preparing. He prepares the cases every morning for the forensic pathologists so that when they're ready to do it, they can just go in and do it. He also prepares the slideshows. He has to sit and bring up the pictures and do any of the dirty work, which is kind of fun. And then there's Dr. Urban. I spoke to her and we really connected after a pretty short time. She's really blunt, just like me, and she sort of just enjoys her job, and you can really tell. There's lots of, it's kind of like a big family there. There's lots of joking going on, and they try to have fun with it as much as they can. There are many experiences that I've had. Learning anatomy, obviously, we discussed. Sitting in on case briefings where I get to learn about the things that have happened recently. There's about, I don't know, like 14 or so cases that come in every day for them to examine. Yes, that many people die. It's amazing. There's question clearing, so for any questions I may have, there's quite a few forensic pathologists there to answer for me. And then there's the discussion of my final product, which we have decided on, but I will leave that to your surprise. So that's me and Dr. Urban. I'm holding one of the replica skeletons, not a real one, don't worry. And yeah. But so my conclusion, I have a few predictions about what I may be going into. I'm going to be doing my final product. And I know that the growth of my love for forensic pathology is probably just going to exponentially increase. I have plans. I'm going to go to college. I'm going to go to medical school, which I really don't have any preference on where that may be. I'd like to move to out of country, maybe much later, Canada, England. As for my goals, I want to be a forensic pathologist with a side of forensic anthropology, just like Dr. Urban. But I also want to take up some research in molecular engineering. So that concludes my presentation. I really hope you enjoyed it. That's a lot of information to swallow. So if you have any questions, just let me know. And it was a pleasure talking to you guys. Thank you.